We are really, really honored to have you. Very excited, and I'd love to just jump into it from here. So thank you again for being here, and thank you for our participants for showing up as well.
And I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can share your screen, Shelli.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Well, before I jump into sharing my screen, why don't we just I'll kind of introduce myself a little bit, and then if everybody wants to just kind of go around the room so I know who all of you are and I can tell you about Space Foundation. And then I do have some slides that I'll be happy to share with you about what is the space ecosystem, what does it look like, where is it going, what are the opportunities. I would anticipate all your audience is interested in that. So again, we'll start with introductions. I'm Shelli Brunswick. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Space Foundation, and we're going to start with Tim. Please just call me Shelli. And we'll go with that. Shelli's good. I had a call sign when I was in the Air Force, and we'll talk about that when I come out and see you all this fall in person. But with that, my journey has 3 chapters. So I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force right out of high school. And I did that for a number of reasons. One, I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I grew up. You know, what did I want to study? What did I want to go to college for? I didn't have a college funding. I didn't have any money to go to school either. And I really wanted to see the world. So I joined the Air Force. I enlisted in the Air Force right out of high school. It was a great opportunity to see the world. I got stationed in Turkey and Germany, which sparked, you could say, my passion for travel and seeing the world and learning new cultures. The other great thing about joining the military was I was able to go to school at night and use tuition assistance. So I was able to get both my bachelor's and master's degree going to school at night, which then allowed me to apply to become an officer in the U.S. Air Force. And so not on the first try, but on the second try, I was selected to become a space acquisition officer. And you're probably wondering, what is a space acquisition officer? And I kind of said, I don't know what this is, but it was basically the entry into being a space person in the U.S. Air Force. And so I was stationed in Los Angeles, where I worked on ground station and launch vehicles and satellites. I then did a airplane tour with education with industry, where I went and worked at Boeing C-17 for a year, learned all about data rights and weight and multi-year contracts. So it was a really great career broadening opportunity to work alongside our Boeing colleagues. And then I worked at an organization called Defense Contract Management Agency. So DCMA, for those of you who know anything about the military, we abbreviate everything with acronyms. So DCMA is your in-plant reps. So I was in the plant facility of Northrop Grumman in Space Park, California, where they were building rockets and on-orbit assets and everything. So it's great to be in the plant, see everything that's happening, and you're the government rep to kind of watch things as they're being developed, be in the meetings, and track things. Then from there, I went and worked as a professor at Defense Acquisition University. I taught about space project management, and then I went finally from there on to DC, working on Capitol Hill as a budget and appropriation liaison for the U.S. Air Force. So securing the funding for the entire Air Force for not only the programs, but personnel and installations. And then the decision was, do I want to stay in the Air Force or move on? And I made a decision at that point at 29 years that I really wanted to retire and do something else. And I was fortunate. The Space Foundation was looking for a chief operating officer, and I applied and was fortunate to be selected. And I've been doing this for 8 years. So a chief operating officer is kind of like the number 2 person in an organization, and my job is to implement the goals and objectives of the board and the chief executive officer. And so that means implement strategy, budget, personnel development. So just about basically everything except finance falls under me. So all of our programs, our P&Ls, our profit and loss divisions, which is our massive space symposium that just took place, all our education programs, our DC activities, as well as taking care of all the people that work for me. I have 110 employees. So making sure every employee is happy where they're at, they're taken care of, they have training, time off, we meet all mandates and laws and requirements. Because I not only have employees in the state of Colorado, which is where I'm headquarters, but I have employees in Florida, Texas, Alabama, and Washington, D.C., and Virginia and the surrounding area. So it's not only knowing the laws in Colorado, but all of those employment laws. So it's an exciting and diverse thing. And I'll kind of share a little bit about Space Foundation. It is maybe the grown-up version of what you're doing. So I'll share a little bit about what we do. We have been in business over 40 years. We just turned 40 last March. And we have 3 main divisions. We have our Space Symposium, or Symposium 365, we call it, because that's where all our events are. And Dave Thomas, thank you, Dave, for joining us today. We just concluded our Space Symposium last week, which is the largest and premier global space activity. We bring together military, commercial, civil, international from around the world to meet here in Colorado Springs. We discuss all the activities that talk about those different activities. What are we doing as we go on to the moon and Mars and cislunar orbit? But we're also talking about the workforce, and we're talking about space law, and we're doing game changers events. So we had over 14,000 participants, 235 exhibitors, 260 speakers, a classified session, and pretty much took up every hotel in Colorado Springs as well as Airbnb. So I hope you all can join us next year, and you just let me know, and I'll make sure you get taken care of. And Dave, you talk to Dave Thomas. Dave and I will work it so that you guys can come and meet with us, because I think it's really important for young professionals like yourself to be at Space Symposium, to put your resumes together, to go around and talk to those people at those exhibits, tell them what you're interested in, because that is a great gateway for you to be part of the space industry. And 2 days before the Space Symposium starts, they do a thing called Fusion Forum. So are any of you part of Space Generation Advisory Council? So I don't see any hands going up, but if you're not part of that and you want to be in the space industry, you should really look at joining SGAC, is what they call it, Space Generation Advisory Council. They do events around the world. They are a global organization of young professionals, 35 and under. And they're a great organization for you to connect with and find things you're passionate about: space law, business, entrepreneurship, sustainable development. They do a lot of great activities. But the Saturday and Sunday before symposium, SGAC puts on an event called Fusion Forum at the Broadmoor, at the hotel we do our event at. And so they do that those 2 days over the weekend. Then Monday, Space Foundation does an event called New Gen, which is our young professional program, 35 and under. So a lot of times our young college students like yourself or young early professionals are in that Fusion Forum in New Gen. And then maybe you don't have to, but then you could stay for the next 3 days of symposium. So Dave, you probably didn't know this was going to be interactive, but I think you know me well enough to know I'm an inclusive kind of person. You just came back from symposium. What were some of your thoughts, and how do you think these amazing individuals could benefit from symposium?
Yeah, Shelli, first, I'd like to tell the students that, excuse me, you are a true champion for space, and not just here in the U.S., but globally. I have bumped into Shelli in Abu Dhabi and places around the world, and she is one of the true leaders for inclusivity and equity in space, but also for students, for workforce. They have programs in K-12 scenarios, and we're seeking to work with them on doing some amazing things. Truly, next to ASU, of course, I think it's one of the most amazing, impactful organizations in the world as it relates to space. So I encourage everyone to follow Shelli as she travels around the world. Follow her on LinkedIn and also Space Foundation. And indeed, it is now the premier space event in the world annually, and so close to home. It's really amazing. And we met with folks from Thailand, from Puerto Rico, Australia, the United Kingdom, Japan, South Korea, and it was truly an amazing event. New Zealand, and so I want to encourage all of the students to hear what Shelli is saying, and I agree. It's an honor just to listen to you speak, Shelli. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it's an honor, but I'm honored to be joining all of you tonight. So I kind of threw a bunch of things in the chat. I try to make things really inclusive. I do have slides, and when we go to those, it's harder to be inclusive because I can't see you this way, but next time we'll be in person. So that kind of tells you what some Space Foundation does with our events, our Space Symposium. Our second main division is our educational programs, and that's through our Center for Innovation and Education. And that's a lot where Dave and I work together. So through our Center for Innovation and Education, we have three main areas. We have our Discovery Center, which is located here in Colorado Springs. It's open to the public, but we also bring in student field trips all throughout the year. We have summer camps, spring break camps, and we can also do those virtually. We then have formal education, kindergarten through 12th grade, and we break it into a systemic program of primary school, middle school, high school, so that, we can start building the pipeline for the future workforce. We have a teacher professional development program, and then we have adult non-accredited education, and that deals a lot with entrepreneurship and facilitation, or creating Space 101 courses in partnership with universities, both in the US as well as around the world, to help understand what is the space economy and how do we get into it. So that covers a little bit about myself and Space Foundation. So I will give you two doors. Your first door is, I'm happy to talk to you about lessons I've learned in my 25-year career, and we can ask questions, or I can go ahead and do the slides first, and we can kind of see how much time we get through that, but then you can always just have me come back another time. So I have several topics. So since we have a nice small group, I really want to know what's best for you all to hear tonight as you're finishing out the school year, so that we make the best use of your time.
I would love to hear about some of the lessons you've learned.
Okay, so we'll do lessons learned. We'll go with that. We'll save the slides for another time. That's always fun too. So some of the lessons I'll share, and I have I'm not going to bring up slides. That way we can keep looking at each other. I kind of talked a little bit about my journey and some of the things that happened. So 3 lessons I'm going to share with you kind of happened in that first chapter of my journey, that chapter when I enlisted in the US Air Force right out of high school before I became an officer. And so the 3 lessons I'm going to share with you is take advantage of every opportunity. Another one's going to be try anyways. Don't be afraid of failure. And that third one is don't fear the unknown. And what that means is, even though I enlisted in the Air Force because I didn't have college money, I had the opportunity to go to school at night and take tuition assistance. And, yes, I had to give up my evenings or weekends, but I was able to take advantage of that opportunity. And that allowed me to complete both my bachelor's and master's degree and then apply to become an officer. So sometimes opportunities come along and they look like work, or it might be volunteering for something, but it helps open a door that leads to something else. So I always say, take advantage of those opportunities when they come along, because a lot of times they open up doors. So the door that going to school at night opened up was I had the ability to apply to become an officer in the Air Force. And so you think that's great. You have a bachelor's and master's degree. It should be easy, but it was not, because the Air Force was looking for STEM professionals. So scientists, technology, engineering, mathematics. And I know you're all looking at me thinking you have 25 years in the space industry, but I'm not a STEM professional. I have a business degree. So I have a bachelor's degree in business and an MBA. So I am all about business, the business of space. So you don't have to have a STEM degree to be in the space industry. We need everyone in the space industry, from high school graduates to PhDs. There's an opportunity for everyone to be in the space industry now. But however, at the time, 25 years ago, the Air Force was looking for STEM degrees. So the first time I applied, I was not accepted. And I knew I may not be accepted because my chances of being accepted were 12%. 1, 2. So some people might even say, why should I even apply? It's only a 12% chance. Why would you apply? So I applied. I was told I was not selected. Thank you so much. Your application will automatically meet the next selection board. Good luck. So what I did is I kind of stepped back and took my application and I updated it. I re-highlighted skills. I got new letters of recommendation, and I resubmitted a new application to that second selection board, still thinking I'm not going to make it. And I started thinking, what is my career going to be as an enlisted airman? What do I want to do? What do I want to accomplish? And just so you know, I was not in space as an enlisted airman. I was in personnel. So I was that HR manager. And what I learned in HR is we care about people, just not you. No, I'm teasing. So HR was great. And I really loved being in HR, being in personnel. So I was really hoping to become a personnel officer. And on the second time, I was called and told that I was selected to become an officer in the Air Force. And I was super excited. That was awesome. Except they wanted me to do this thing called space acquisition, which leads me to my third story, which is don't fear the unknown. I don't know if you know what space acquisition is, but I certainly didn't know what it was 25 years ago, and I didn't want to do it. I was like, I want to be personnel. I want to be a personnel officer. All the people I know are in personnel. That's where I want to be. So I asked all my mentors, would they call and try to get me reclassified into personnel? And finally, one day, someone from the Air Force Personnel Center called me and said, you know, Sergeant Brunswick, we really need you to be a space acquisition officer. They weren't really asking me either. So, you know, I saluted smartly. I said, yes, sir. And that's what I did. I became a space acquisition officer, and that started my 25-year career in the space industry. And again, had I had my way, we wouldn't be here tonight. I'd be doing personnel somewhere, right? I'd be an HR manager, recruiter now. And HR is important, and it's an important part of the space industry, but I'm really glad that the Air Force made that decision for me. So I kind of share with you, sometimes you may see things and say, I don't know what that is, or I think I really want to do this, and this is more exciting than I don't know what that is. But sometimes, you know, try it anyways. Don't fear the unknown. Go for it. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, that's okay. You can pivot and do something else. Because I've learned in my career, I've made a lot of adjustments and changes, and, you know, it works out sometimes. So I'm going to kind of pause there and see, does anyone have any questions on those first three lessons or any other insight?
I have a quick question. So you are more involved in the business side of the space industry, and we are the Space Business Association. We're affiliated with Carey School of Business. So our mission is to connect the business world to the space industry. We're the only organization that does this right now. How important is the business side of the space industry right now in 2023?
Super important. So let's clarify, even though 25 years ago I had a business degree working in a program office, I still led teams, billion-dollar teams that were creating satellites and ground station and launch vehicles. Now, my teams were subject matter experts. They were engineers, logisticians, finance, amazing, you know, data rights. But what I learned is the most important thing being a leader is just that, being a leader, listening, getting everyone's input, and then ultimately you're there to make the best decision for the Air Force. And so it's not about personal agendas. It's very simplistic to make a decision, but it can be very challenging when you have subject matter experts. And for those of you who know anything about project management, which I also recommend is a great skill you should learn as a business leader, because project management is all about cost, schedule, and performance. What is the cost to get that product to line? What is the performance level you want it at? What's the level you want it at? And what's the timeline? And all of those things can have a trade-off. You're going to have a baseline, you're going to have a baseline timeline, a baseline budget. And what you will learn is very few things deliver flawlessly. So starting 25 years ago, and you can even go back 60 years to the beginning of the space program, it was all about project management, cost, schedule, and performance, and the business of developing rockets to take us to the moon, the space shuttle, and now where we are today. So business has always been part of it. It just hasn't been as prominent as you see it now. What you can see now is Peter Beck. Do you know who Peter Beck is? He created a company called Rocket Lab out of New Zealand. So Peter Beck did an interview, so you can Google him. And in his interview, it just came out a couple weeks ago, he said NASA wouldn't hire him, so he decided to start his own rocket company. So what I share with you is, you know, being a business person or an entrepreneur or understanding business savvy can really help you get out there, because what being business about is really about being a leader, having good communication skills, understanding your program. Can you articulate it and champion it? And can you get supporters? So when I did that in the Air Force as the program manager, that was my job, to continue to advocate for my program unless the decision was made not to move forward with it. And as you know, most space programs move forward, but they are delayed greatly in schedule. All see James Webb that launched, and it's sending back amazing images, but it took far longer and cost more than it was planned. But if you're going to start a business, having that business acumen is incredibly important. And then the second thing that will be important is, what is your idea, but who is the team you're going to hire to support you? Because as a leader, you don't have to do it all. As a matter of fact, I'm happy not to be the smartest person in the room. I wasn't the smartest person in the room when I was sitting in the room with all the doing all the programs for the Air Force. I was that program manager with a business degree. But what was most important is I could listen to all the experts around the room, get a dialogue, and try to get consensus on what was the best way to move forward that was in the best interest of the Air Force and national security. Now, that's really simple when you're working for a government agency. It can be different when you're working for a company, but ultimately your company has values and goals and objectives. And just like my job now at Space Foundation as a chief operating officer, that's my job to deliver the goals and objectives of the board and the CEO. And so you always know, I'll call it your true north. What are you striving for? And that will help you make the decisions that you need for programs to move forward or businesses to succeed. But you also need to think about that for yourself. We could talk about business, but you're the business of your own career. What is your North Star? What are your goals and objectives? Where do you want to be in 5 to 10 years? And that can help you make those trade-offs between what are you doing today that will help you get to where you want to be in 5 or 10 years. I always tell people, you're the CEO of your own company, yourself. And how do you want to get there? So you're in business, but every person here and every person at Arizona State University is the CEO of their own business themselves, and they have to make all those business decisions. And so I think being a good business person and having good leadership skills is going to help you navigate life. So are there other questions about that? Or I can jump on to some more lessons learned if you want.
I'd like to ask, what would you say is your North Star? What's your true north at this point in your career? So we've got to hear a little bit about your past. Where are you at right now in your career and your ambitions, and where do you hope to use your positions, and where do you hope to take the company that is attached to into the future? And then to translate maybe for some of the less business people, instead of the idea of true north, or whatever, we could talk about trajectory. So just for you guys.
Well, for me, it's been simple, because while I was in the Air Force, we had a credo in the military, in the Air Force. It was integrity first, service before self, and excellence in all we do. And so after almost 30 years, those things don't go away. So I still believe in always having integrity, always being authentic and genuine, being passionate about your goals and connecting that authenticity to others around you. I'm sure when you meet leaders who may not be authentic to what they're saying, but when you get me going on my soapbox about space and how awesome it is, it's pretty hard to get me off the soapbox. I'm pretty passionate about it. But my true north today is, it's really about how do I empower the next generation? That's why I'm here tonight, because to me, it's about, you're the future. I've only got so much more runway, as they call it, and I want to make sure that I'm empowering the next generation to really grow the global space ecosystem and to find their way into it. When we look at space, most people are thinking, going to the moon and Mars, but 77% of the space economy is commercial. It's products and services we're using every day, like Zoom. Zoom would not be possible without the space industry. How many other applications on your phone? Your phone has all kinds of NASA imaging and algorithms that help it run, that all came from NASA. So what I want to empower is that next generation that wants to look at the growing space ecosystem, which was $469 billion last year. That's going to grow to $1 trillion by the end of this decade and $3 trillion by 2040. And I really want to empower you to say, where do I want to be in the space industry and how can I find my way? How do I find internships? How do I find mentors? Just like, how do I find networks, sharing Space Generation Advisory Council and Fusion Forum and going to symposium and finding great people like Dave Thomas, who I also saw as one of your speakers coming up. Those are going to help you get into the space industry and find your path. And then the path is, do you want to work for the government? Do you want to be military or commercial or civil, NASA? Do you want to work for yourself? Do you want to start a company, or do you want to work for somebody else? Do you want to partner internationally? There's a lot of opportunities to study abroad. And so what is your passion and how do you want to play your role in it? Because you have entrepreneur to artists, astronauts, project managers, policymakers. We need space lawyers, teachers. So there's a lot of opportunities. So, my North Star is, how do I help empower you to find your way into the space industry and take my place so that, I can go retire and travel the world and take cruises, right? That's what we do when we get older, right? I don't know if I'll ever retire, but definitely that's kind of my North Star today, is about how can I give back? And that's all. One of my favorite books, so I always recommend books, is there we go, is Reflections of a Servant Leader by Major General Al Flowers. Nope, we're going to do this. There we go. And I worked for General Flowers when I worked on Capitol Hill. General Flowers is the longest serving airman in the United States Air Force history. He and his family were migrant farmers. And he talks about enlisting in the U.S. Air Force and then retiring as a 2-star general. But what General Flowers always taught me was about gratitude and serving others and trying to give back and help empower others. And so I still carry those lessons with me about being that servant leader and helping others find their true north. So I hope that kind of gave you some insight on that.
Awesome response. Questions answered and more. Thank you.
Awesome. I can be more brief if you want, and we'll go as long as you want. I know some of you have to jump off, so go ahead. We'll record this. I will tell you, and I'll try to throw it in the chat. I did do a TEDx, and I'll see if I can find that for you. So I did a commencement address for CSU Pueblo. So there's a couple of these lessons learned in this commencement address. And I also did a TEDx. So you can check that out on what space got to do with it, because that will cover a lot of things. But let's kind of talk about some more of those lessons I learned in my journey and see if anybody else has some thoughts about it. So the next 3 lessons I talk about is about getting out from behind your desk. Life is all about relationships, and never disqualify yourself from something you haven't been offered. So how that works is, after I became an officer in the Air Force, and later on, I had been in Los Angeles for many years, 12 years, and I really worked a lot of programs. So although I'm not a STEM professional, I'd worked on programs enough that I understand the program and development life cycle. I certainly will never be an engineer, but I get the points of engineering because I'd worked on 12 years of programs. But then I transitioned to DC, where it was more about, can you articulate to others what you're doing and why you're doing it and why it has value. And more importantly, these people may not understand what you do or what the military is. And that really was true when I went to work on Capitol Hill, but I'll come back to that. But I would not have had that job had I not gotten out from behind my desk. Because remember, I'm a program manager, space acquisition. So when I went to DC, I was working HR for the acquisition workforce, making sure all the acquisition workforce were meeting their requirements. So to be a space acquisition person in the military, you're required by law to have certain credentials. And they're military credentials, and then there's also civilian counterparts, I'll call it. So in the military, I was a program manager, but I also have my project management professional certification from Project Management Institute. So just so you know, like, you can get certifications in the military, but there's also certifications you can get outside the military. So if anybody here wants to become a project manager or learn more about it, you can check out Project Management Institute. So here I was working in a cubicle with a bunch of other people. And that evening, there was a reception being hosted by the Air Force Association for all the acquisition workforce in the Pentagon to come out and, you know, be recognized. And they were giving out some awards to people. So I was new to this. I was new to DC. I didn't really know anybody there. I didn't know anybody going to the reception. And nobody in my office was going to go to the reception. They all were going to go home. So I made the decision, you know what? I'm going to go. I'd never been to Ruth Chris. I'm going to go check it out and see what this is all about. So what I did is I went to the event by myself, got out from behind my desk. I went to the reception. I didn't really know many people because I'd only been in DC a couple months, but I slowly went around the room and kind of talked to a couple people that I knew. And eventually I saw my boss's boss was there. And I knew him and he knew me because his exec went on vacation, and I raised my hand and volunteered and said, I'll fill in for 2 weeks to work 12 or 16-hour days to be your exec. Well, he's off on vacation with his family. So my boss's boss knew me. And so I made my way over to him to say hello. And he was talking to another person, another gentleman. And he kind of looked at me and he was like, hey, Brunswick, what are you doing? And I was like, hey, I'm waiting for you to move me. Because although HR sounds exciting, and I thought that's what I always wanted to do. Remember, way back when I was enlisted, it wasn't what I wanted to do anymore. And I wanted to get back out and do something more exciting with space and acquisition. Well, the person he was talking to was the person that he had working on Capitol Hill in the Senate. And the person was there to tell him, hey, sir, I've been picked up for command. I'm moving. You need to find somebody new to take my place. And my boss's boss looked at me and he looked at this other guy and he was like, hey, Brunswick, how would you like to be a legislative liaison? Now, it didn't work out quite that way, but what worked out was because I had volunteered, I'd been his exec, he knew me, and I got out from behind my desk and went to that reception and put myself back in front of him. He gave me the opportunity to interview for the job. And I was the first person he sent to the interview. And that person who was leaving the job, I called him and said, hey, tell me what I need to know. How can I prepare for this interview? And he helped and other people helped. And I got ready and I looked up all the people that I was going to interview with on LinkedIn. And I came in and did the best I could. And I left. And my boss's boss, I'm just going to call him the Godfather. The Godfather called them and said, hey, you want her? Or do you want me to send somebody else? And they said, no, we want her. And so I got the job. And after I had the job for a few months, they told me, you gave the best interview anybody's ever given. And so I have to give credit to obviously my boss's boss, who let me even try for the interview. But it was also the people who helped prep me for the interview and help me know what to do. But it's also all the mentors and people throughout my career who helped me prepare for that interview. Because I'm going to tell you, one of the biggest skills that helped me be successful in the interview, but also on my job in Capitol Hill, was being a professor at Defense Acquisition University, teaching people about project management and the acquisition life cycle of programs was a hard concept to teach. And when you go work on Capitol Hill and you're trying to explain to people who do not understand the military or the military processes, planning, programming, budgeting, and execution, PPBE is the process they call it, being able to break things into very simple terms and communicate with others and explain how processes work and take people out to see things and meet people and talk to them, I just say it was money in the bank, right? It helped the Air Force secure its budget and continue their programs. So get out from behind your desk, volunteer for that hard project, get out from behind your desk, go to those events, meet people at socials. Networking is not a bad thing. Networking can open the door to your next career. I never even knew I could be a legislative liaison. It was the dream job. It was the best job I had in the Air Force, and it would not have happened had I not gone to that reception. The next thing I'll tell you about is life is all about relationships. So my first boss, when I got the job working on Capitol Hill, his name was Colonel Keith Zugel. And he told me, life is all about relationships. It's all about building and maintaining relationships. And what he was saying is, when you go work on Capitol Hill, they see legislative liaisons come all the time, because a lot of times it's just a touch and go for a lot of military officers. They go, they do 6 months to a year, and then they're off to command and they get promoted. And so sometimes it's really hard to build a relationship with people on Capitol Hill, to get them to take your call, to meet with you, to explain why the Air Force needs things, the budget, the requirements. And so he said, life is all about relationships. So I learned that when I started working on Capitol Hill. I got up from behind my desk again, and I would go around and visit every one of my staffers. I would go talk to them. This is when we had hard copy magazines, the Air Force magazine, and I would walk around and bring them magazines, and I would highlight like 3 articles that I thought were great that they might enjoy. I would offer to take them on trips, staff dels, we called them, staff delegations, where we would go visit military installations so they could learn about the Air Force. And I was building those relationships. And even today, I've left Capitol Hill 8 years ago. I still have congressional staffers I'm still in touch with. But this lesson isn't just for what I did on Capitol Hill. It's every day. Your life is all about relationships. The people you're going to meet, whether they're mentors or you're a mentor, life is all about building and maintaining those relationships, because each of those relationships can open a door to the next opportunity, or you could open a door for somebody else for their opportunity. So build and maintain relationships. And then that third one, never disqualify yourself from something you haven't been offered. So when I went to retire from the Air Force, I knew a year out I was going to retire. And I shared with people, hey, I'm going to retire. Will you let me know if you hear of anything? Well, one day, the job description came across for this COO of Space Foundation. And I kind of thought, this isn't for me, because I was looking for a job to be a lobbyist, a government affairs person, because I was working on Capitol Hill. Or do I go back and be a program manager working for the Air Force as a civilian? Or do I go work for a contract company that needs a program manager doing Air Force programs? So I was kind of, I was in that tunnel vision of, hey, this is what I think I can do after I retire. But then this job came along for chief operating officer at Space Foundation. What did I know about that? And I kind of said to myself, and I said out loud in my office with other people, I said, I don't know if I should apply for this job. I don't know, COO Space Foundation. And my good friend Vanessa said, never disqualify yourself from something you haven't been offered. So I went, okay. So I applied for the job. Several interviews later, and months, candidates, I was the best person for the job, and I got the job. But again, I almost didn't apply because I didn't think it was for me. I didn't think that was what I should do. I thought I was supposed to be government affairs or a lobbyist or a program manager. So don't put yourself in a box. Look at the opportunities that come and apply. And even if you don't get it the first time, I wasn't selected to be an officer the first time. It just means you got to know once. It doesn't mean it's a no the second time or the third time or the fourth time. How many times did SpaceX have launch failures before they finally, sent US astronauts from US soil to the International Space Station? Multiple failures. They almost went bankrupt. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try. And it means you shouldn't disqualify yourself from something you haven't been offered.